Imagine what it would be like if you had hundreds of tumors all over your body. Imagine that you would not be able to wear designer clothing or designer jewelry or style your hair in such a way that would take the attention away from the tumors that are so prominent. Our guest this evening, David Evans, has dealt with the challenge of people reacting to him, sometimes negatively, based on a genetic disorder that he had no control over. He will tell us how he has learned to lead himself over a body disorder. Please welcome our guest, David Evans.
Thank you.
David, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Why don't we start off with you telling us a little bit about neurofibromatosis?
Well, neurofibromatosis, or NF for short, is a genetic disorder that causes tumors to grow anywhere in or on the body. It can also cause brain abnormalities such as what they call unidentified bright objects, which cause learning disorders, and it also can cause damage to the frontal lobe, which creates executive function issues such as being disorganized, being what people might call unruly. You have very difficult controlling your impulses. It can also cause deafness, blindness, cancer, and death. My mother was only 38 years old when her NF caused her to have cancer and she died. My sister was 48 years old when NF caused her to have cancer and she passed away at 48. Recently, it has been discovered that the average life expectancy for someone with NF is 56, and I'm 63, so I figure I'm doing very well. It is also extremely variable. I had a friend who had 5 tumors his entire life. The only way he discovered he had the disorder is when he had 2 sons, and they both had what are known as café layette spots. It's just brown patches of skin that not cause any issues, but the odds of having 2 children with those characteristics and not having NF are astronomical. And as I said, extremely variable. According to the National Institute of Health, 500 tumors is an unusually high number. I have several times that. I have probably twice that, just on my back alone.
Okay. Well, thank you for that information that increases our awareness of what NF is. How have you been able to work well? You are in a very productive job, and you said that this NF affects the executive function of your brain.
Well, and I do have some issues with that sometimes, and I also have learning disabilities. So I sometimes miss little things, but I am able to do complicated tasks. So for example, I can design a 5-year model which will show what the tax impacts of a transaction are out 5 years in advance, and then I'll forget to change the heading on a work paper.
Oh, wow.
So it sometimes, is an issue and drives some people a little crazy how I can do the complex, but sometimes it seems like I cannot do the simple, and it's a little irritating for myself. And a lot of it, and my ability to, I earned a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, I'm a CPA. Very much of this came from just pure determination. And it may sound funny, but when I was in 6th grade, my English teacher announced to the entire class, "David, I don't know what grade to give you. There's no grade lower than F. And believe it or not, that sparked something in me to determine, okay, I knew I wouldn't always be as bright as the other people, but if I tried harder, I could do it. And I think I've proved that, is trying harder.
Fantastic. And you have demonstrated by what you just said, one of the keys to self-leadership is your ability to influence your thoughts and your behaviors. Now, you said that when you were 6 years old, you had this experience with your teacher. How old were you when you first discovered that you had it?
Well, it's really difficult to say because I cannot remember a time when I did not have tumors. But I do remember starting in first grade is when the harassment began, when children told me not to come near them because if I did, they would become a wart like me. And my own family told me, and see, this is another problem, back then they didn't even know what it was. And those who had some idea, they called it von Recklinghausen's disease, after a 19th century German doctor. And I was told, well, it sort of runs in the family, but maybe not. They wanted to avoid admitting it, I think. And they told me my mother had tumors, and that's why I have them. And her father, it was very adamant, no, he did not have this disorder, no way. But he admitted that a couple of his aunts did. And based on scientific knowledge, as we know now, he definitely had it. But there's not one person in my mother's family who, to this day, will admit any possibility he had it. I think there's still some taint to it. Yeah. And it was not until the 1970s when the name was changed from von Recklinghausen's disease to neurofibromatosis, or NF. And believe it or not, it was not until 1980 when the government set up official criteria to say this person definitely has NF. Before that, you were told, well, you kind of maybe sort of have it. I mean, even doctors were very vague with it. So that made it even more difficult.
Oh, wow. So did you ever see pictures of your mother?
Oh, I remember my mother, and I don't remember her having a lot of tumors. As I said, I was 10 years old when she died, but she had this huge tumor about half the size of her head. And it was removed a couple of times, and it grew back. And that is what I learned much later in life, a certain sign that that tumor is going to be cancerous and it's going to be a major issue.
Now, what about your sister?
Well, my sister, I don't understand what happened to her as much because she had tumors, not as many as I do, but there again, one or two could either, I'm not sure what happened, grew internally or they became cancerous, and then again, like I said, she died at 48 years old. She was very young.
Right. Okay. What is your earliest memory? Now, you said that you had children who were rejecting of you. What about the teachers and the other people who were involved in your life? Were they rejecting as well?
The only person who was really on my side was my mother. And part, I think, she identified because she had a disorder. My father, he once told me that, don't worry about what other people think, you're pretty in two ways. You're pretty ugly, you're pretty apt to stay that way. Now, I should mention he had a little bit too much to drink when he told me this, but I had no really any support by anyone. I mean, I've had teachers who were, horrific.
Well, what kept you stable? Because you were able to deal with all that rejection and the negativity from your father that...
Well, the child, I think some people would have thought I was unstable. I did very poorly in school until 7th grade. I received straight D's in conduct in school because impulse control, plus you have people harassing you every day. You're not going to be in the best of moods. And so for 8 years in grade school, I received straight D's in conduct. And the reason I received D's is because there was no such thing as F. Most people perceived me as a troublemaking, misbehaved, stupid monster. And that was the first time I could ever remember a compliment from my grandmother is when I was in high school and I made the honor roll for the first time. I can never remember a compliment before that time, ever.
So how were you able to make the honor roll? You said that you got D's in conduct. What about your academic grades?
Well, in grade school, up through 5th or 6th grade, it was, mostly C's, some D's. And the turning point, as I said, was this teacher, who made this announcement. And then I decided, okay, no one's going to call me stupid. So for 7th grade, I just was determined I was going to, even though I still get a D in conduct, I was going to perform well academically. And I did so well in 7th grade. And another portion is that in grade school, they divided us into 3 groups, above average students, average, and other. And I was always in the other. So I did so well in 7th grade, I was promoted to the top class in grade 8. And on the first day of school, I walked in the classroom and one of the other students walked up to me and said, "Evans, what the hell are you doing in this room?" So I did have that reputation still then. I didn't belong. And in high school, I had a teacher, my first grading period, I had a 3.25 grade average. And I had a teacher who I liked, and he said, "Well, what's wrong? You could do better than that." And that was the first teacher who actually gave me encouragement. I could do better. And I remember I had a 3.5 the next, 3.75 the next semester after that. But I never could get a 4.0 because English was my weakest point, and I would always get a B in English. But I could get A's in anything else except English.
Well, good for you. Good for your ability to achieve at your maximum academic level. What was it when we see so many kids today who want to give up on life and they're not dealing with anything like what you have dealt with during your early years? What do you think are the characteristics that you embrace, other than the persistence? Because
yes. What you have to understand is that for many years, I was very social inactive, shall we say. After I graduated from college, I would work. I worked 8 hours a day, just like everybody else. And my first job out of college, I had one individual I worked with. He would never look at me when we talked. The only thing I ever saw from him was the side of his face, because he wouldn't look at me. So I became very antisocial. I just spent most of my time watching TV at home. Until 1988, I took out a personal ad in a newspaper, and I met this fantastic angel named Shelley. And it's impossible for me to say how much she changed my life. And Mary, she was one of the ones who, the person who told me I should join Toastmasters, and that might help me overcome this shyness. My first speech at Toastmasters, I stood behind the lectern the whole time, read notes. It took me 3 months and some more encouragement from her before I did another speech. But with her encouragement, and with the tools I learned at Toastmasters, the positive feedback, everything at Toastmasters, at least you get something positive. I mean, people might tell you, "Oh, you need to improve on this," but every speech, they would also give you a little positive. And that made me to embrace Toastmasters even more. And the tools and the encouragement I received at Toastmasters allowed me to become an official spokesman for the NF organization. And I even had an opportunity where I spoke in front of a U.S. Senate subcommittee on health and human sources. And I explained life with NF to this U.S. Senate subcommittee. And none of that would have ever been possible if I had not been trained at Toastmasters.
Well, what a wonderful advertisement for Toastmasters. We need to have him as a national spokesman. Okay. Well, it's almost at the end of our time together, David. Would you give us a take-home message for people who are struggling with a condition in which they're tempted to hide out rather than face? What kinds of self-leadership do you think that they should embrace in order to?
One thing I would like to mention, though, I mean, for everybody, if you see someone with NF, remember, we're not contagious. That is the #1 message for all the audience out there who do not have NF. And the other is, I think some of the main things is you need this determination. I had a lot of things not going well for me, but I was able to succeed. I think you need someone, you find someone who loves you unconditionally. And I can't imagine how my life would have been without Shelley. And then join an organization like Toastmasters or some other organization where you can get enthused about this, something that you enjoy, something that you are passionate about. Find your passion, I think, is really a key to me.
Okay. And isn't that true about every area of life in which you want to be successful? If you find your passion and find your why, then you're more likely to be successful in whatever you do.
Oh, definitely. I cannot imagine being successful without passion.
Okay. Well, David, we thank you so much for the information that you've provided for us today. You've increased our awareness of what it's like to live with NF, and I am going to flesh this story out more on my blog. We're going to post this to YouTube, but you can go to Cheryl's Leads and find out more about David's story. And we thank him so much for coming today. Let's give David a round of applause.